Number 15. A nation built on silent wealth, Luxembourg stands as one of the world's smallest countries. Yet its wealth per capita towers above almost every other nation on Earth. But here's what catches visitors off guard. There are no gold-plated Lamborghinis cruising the streets, no towering glass monuments to excess. Instead, this financial powerhouse wraps itself in an almost mystical cloak of modesty. Behind unremarkable storefronts, billion-dollar investment funds quietly orchestrate global markets. In hushed banking halls, deals worth more than an entire country's GDP get sealed with handshakes and whispered conversations. The locals themselves seem almost embarrassed by their prosperity. They sip coffee in humble cafes, live in tidy but unremarkable homes, and drive sensible cars that wouldn't turn heads anywhere else. Yet beneath this carefully cultivated ordinariness, the financial machinery hums with otherworldly efficiency. Luxembourg has become Europe's quiet puppet master, pulling economic strings that reach every corner of the globe. This secrecy has earned the country some uncomfortable nicknames. Financial journalists whisper about sinful tax arrangements and shadowy loopholes that make global elites disappear their fortunes like magic tricks. But perhaps the most taboo aspect isn't the money itself, it's talking about it. Asking someone about their wealth here isn't just rude, it's practically heretical. This culture of financial silence sets the stage for something even more intriguing: how such hidden affluence shapes the unforgiving rules of everyday behavior. Number 14. Polite to the point of silence. If Luxembourg's wealth operates in whispers, then its social etiquette functions in near total silence. Step off a train in Luxembourg City, and you'll immediately sense something different. Conversations happen in hushed tones. Personal space feels sacred, and even laughter seems rationed. The unwritten social contract here demands more than basic politeness. It requires a kind of social invisibility that borders on the supernatural. Every interaction follows a precise choreography: the mandatory moine greeting when entering shops, the carefully measured thank you after every transaction, the almost religious respect for personal boundaries. But these aren't just nice manners, they are survival mechanisms. In a country where 47% of residents come from somewhere else, speaking different languages and carrying different cultural baggage. For newcomers, this social camouflage can feel suffocating. Expats describe learning to become ghosts in public spaces, perfecting the art of existing without disturbing the delicate harmony. Loud phone conversations on buses are met with icy stares. Public displays of emotion, even joy, feel almost transgressive. Yet Luxembourgers see this extreme politeness as their greatest achievement: the ability to blend dozens of nationalities into one seamlessly functioning society. It's politeness as social engineering, manners as crowd control. But when the sun sets in Luxembourg, as carefully controlled daytime persona gives way to something altogether more surprising. These rules of restraint face their greatest tests. Number 13. Nightlife in a nation of restraint after dark. Luxembourg transforms, but not in the way you might expect. Hidden behind those modest facades that define the daytime city, an entirely different world awakens. Michelin-starred restaurants serve wine lists that cost more than most people's cars. Jazz bars tucked into medieval cellars pour cocktails that would make Manhattan bartenders weep with envy. High-end clubs pulse with music, but even here, the national obsession with restraint casts its spell. This is indulgence with a PhD in discretion. You won't find anyone stumbling drunk through the streets or engaging in the kind of theatrical debauchery that defines nightlife elsewhere. Instead, Luxembourg's after-hours scene operates like a luxury whisper: expensive, exclusive, and eerily controlled. It's as if the country has figured out how to be sinful and saintly simultaneously. The real tension emerges when waves of young cross-border party seekers pour in from France, Belgium, and Germany, bringing their louder Messier traditions with them. These cultural collisions create fascinating friction. Local bouncers trained in diplomatic restraint trying to manage crowds who've then never heard of Luxembourg's invisible social rules. The result is a nightlife scene that feels like a social experiment. What happens when unstoppable party forces meet immovable politeness objects? The answer reveals itself in Luxembourg as approach to something even more controlling than social etiquette: its laws about what can and cannot be built. Number 12. The law against overbuilding. In a world where wealth typically announces itself through towering monuments of glass and steel, Luxembourg has chosen a radically different path. Despite being one of Europe's most important financial centers, the country has essentially declared war on unchecked development. Strict building laws don't just regulate construction, they actively resist it, treating each new project like a potential threat to the nation's soul. Developers here face what can only be described as bureaucratic gauntlets that would make medieval siege warfare look straightforward. Years of negotiations, environmental assessments, heritage reviews, and community consultations transform even modest projects into epic sagas. The government doesn't just approve or deny building permits. It seems to approach each one as a philosophical question about what Luxembourg should become. Walk through the city center, and you'll see the results of this architectural restraint: centuries-old fortifications, standing shoulder to shoulder with discreet modern banks, creating a skyline that feels more like a conversation between eras than a conquest by commerce. Small villages throughout the country guard their historic character with almost religious fervor, treating any proposed change as potential sacrilege. This obsession with controlling physical space mirrors something even more profound: how Luxembourgers have elevated privacy from a preference into something approaching a sacred right. Number 11. Privacy as a sacred right. In Luxembourg, privacy isn't just valued, it's worshipped. Neighbors can live wall to wall for decades while knowing less about each other than most people know about celebrities. This isn't coldness. It's a deliberately constructed fortress of personal space that defines the very essence of Luxembourgish identity. Ask someone here about their family, their income, or even their weekend plans, and you'll witness a masterclass in polite deflection. Personal questions aren't just inappropriate, they're treated as minor acts of violence against the social order. This cultural shield partly stems from the country's role as a financial sanctuary, where professional discretion and personal privacy have become indistinguishable. For expats, this privacy obsession creates a peculiar form of social isolation. They often describe feeling like actors in a play where everyone else knows the script except them. Building genuine friendships requires patience measured in years, not months, as locals slowly, cautiously lower their invisible barriers. The irony deepens when you consider Luxembourg's extensive surveillance infrastructure: cameras monitoring public spaces, digital systems tracking movements, regulations governing everything from noise levels to parking. The country simultaneously guards individual privacy with fierce determination while accepting collective monitoring as perfectly normal. This careful balance between private secrecy and public transparency becomes even more complex when you consider Luxembourg as greatest identity challenge: being a nation that speaks 3 different languages. Number 10. 3 languages, 1 identity crisis. Luxembourg doesn't just have multiple official languages, it lives them simultaneously, creating a linguistic reality that can feel like stepping through cultural portals throughout a single day. Government documents appear in French, school lessons unfold in German, and intimate conversations flow in Luxembourgish, the country's emotional heartbeat language that sounds like German's more relaxed cousin. For locals, this trilingual dance feels natural, almost unconscious. They switch between languages mid-conversation, choosing words based on precision, emotion, or simply which language captures a particular thought most beautifully. But for outsiders, it creates a constantly shifting landscape of inclusion and exclusion, where understanding depends not just on what you know, but which linguistic door happens to be open in any given moment. The 3 languages create their own hidden hierarchies. French dominates law and high politics. German rules education and formal communication, while Luxembourgish carries the emotional weight of true belonging. You can speak perfect French and German and still feel like an outsider if you can't catch the Luxembourgish jokes or understand the cultural references embedded in the local language. For younger Luxembourgers, this linguistic complexity creates unique pressures mastering 3 languages isn't optional. It's survival. Some thrive on this mental gymnastics, seeing it as a superpower that makes them citizens of multiple worlds. Others feel it dilutes their sense of clear identity, leaving them fluent in 3 languages, but sometimes unsure which one truly speaks for their soul. This linguistic complexity becomes even more fascinating when you consider that nearly half the people navigating these language barriers were uneven born in Luxembourg. Number 9. A nation of foreigners. Here's a statistic that should make you pause. In Luxembourg, foreigners don't just visit. They've essentially moved in and made themselves at home. Nearly half of the country's residents were born somewhere else, creating one of the most internationally diverse populations on the planet. Portuguese construction workers, Italian restaurant owners, French civil servants, German bankers, and an ever-growing army of global professionals have transformed Luxembourg into a kind of miniature United Nations. This demographic reality creates fascinating cultural paradoxes. In some neighborhoods, you're more likely to hear Portuguese than Luxembourgish. Italian families have imported their food traditions so successfully that authentic trattorias outnumber traditional Luxembourgish restaurants. French professionals commute across the border daily, treating Luxembourg like an extension of their home country rather than a foreign destination. Yet integration remains frustratingly complex. Despite living side by side, immigrant communities often orbit each other without truly mixing. Portuguese families gather in their own social clubs. Italian communities maintain their own networks. And expatriate professionals create bubbles that sometimes barely acknowledge the local culture they're living within. For native Luxembourgers, this demographic shift creates an existential question. What does it mean to be Luxembourgish when Luxembourgers are nearly outnumbered in their own country? Some embrace the diversity as proof of their nation's magnetic appeal. Others worry quietly about cultural dilution, watching their small homeland transform into something unrecognizable. This demographic pressure becomes even more intense when you consider the eye-watering cost of actually living in this multicultural paradise. Number 8. The hidden price of Paradise Luxembourg's wealth comes with a price tag that can literally take your breath away. Housing costs here don't just rival major global cities. They often surpass them, creating a cost of living that feels designed to test human financial endurance. Rents that would shock New Yorkers, grocery bills that make Parisians wince, and restaurant prices that could fund small vacations elsewhere transform daily life into an expensive exercise in survival. The truly surreal part? Many Luxembourgers have become economic refugees in their own region, driving across borders to France, Belgium, or Germany just to buy groceries, fill gas tanks, or enjoy affordable meals. Weekend shopping expeditions to neighboring countries aren't adventures. They're financial necessities, turning Luxembourg into a kind of go-in prison where even the wealthy feel poor. For low-wage workers to cleaning staff, restaurant servers, and shop assistants who keep the country functioning, the math becomes almost impossible. They serve the wealthy while struggling to afford basic necessities in the same neighborhoods where their customers live comfortably. It's a form of economic apartheid hiding behind Luxembourg's polished prosperity, creating invisible divides that the country's wealth statistics never capture. Yet demand for Luxembourg life continues rising, drawn by safety, opportunity, and the intoxicating promise of financial security. People willingly pay these crushing costs for something that transcends money, the chance to live in a place that feels like it exists outside normal rules. And perhaps nowhere is this sense of existing outside normal reality more evident than in Luxembourg's landscapes, which seem borrowed from fairy tales rather than designed by geography. Number 7. Castles, forests, and fairy tales step beyond Luxembourg's financial districts, and you enter a world that seems designed by medieval fantasy writers rather than urban planners. Massive castles vined in Bowershy, Beaufort rise from forested hills like monuments to forgotten magic. These aren't museum pieces or tourist reconstructions. They're living pieces of a landscape that has somehow survived centuries of European warfare, industrialization, and modernization. The Ardennes forests stretch across the countryside in waves of ancient green, hiding valleys where time seems to move differently. Villages nestle into hillsides with cobblestone streets that have felt the footsteps of Roman soldiers, medieval merchants, and World War II resistance fighters. Walking through these settlements feels like stepping through historical portals, where each corner might reveal another century. For visitors, the contrast is almost hallucinogenic: morning meetings in glass-wall banks discussing billion-dollar transactions, afternoon walks through forests where legends of knights and spirits still feel plausible. Luxembourg exists in multiple time zones simultaneously, somehow managing to be Europe's financial future, and its preserved past in the same small space. But these picturesque landscapes carry darker memories. The same forests that enchant tourists also witnessed the Battle of the Bulge, where American and German forces fought some of World War II's bloodiest engagements. The fairy tale beauty sits atop layers of historical trauma, creating a landscape that is simultaneously magical and haunted. From these forests of memory and myth, Luxembourg's cultural identity emerges in celebrations that blend ancient traditions with modern community spirit. Number 6. Festivals of fire and wine. Luxembourg may prize quiet restraint in daily life, but its festivals reveal a completely different cultural personality, one that celebrates with surprising intensity and ancient passion. The Biergrennen transforms the countryside into a landscape of ritualistic fire, where massive bonfires blaze across hilltops in a pagan-rooted ceremony designed to chase away winter's darkness. These aren't quaint community gatherings. They're primal celebrations that connect modern Luxembourgers to pre-Christian traditions. Even more extraordinary is the Echternach Dancing Procession, a UNESCO-recognized festival where thousands of pilgrims hop and dance through medieval streets in a display of religious devotion that looks more like collective ecstasy than traditional worship. Watching normally reserved Luxembourgers lose themselves in rhythmic, trance-like movement reveals cultural depths that everyday politeness completely conceals. The country's wine festivals showcase yet another facet of this hidden personality. The Moselle Valley transforms into a celebration of Luxembourg's surprisingly sophisticated wine culture, where refined tastings blend with folk music and dancing that continues long into the night. These events prove that beneath the surface restraint lies a culture that knows how to celebrate. They just prefer to do it seasonally rather than daily. These festivals serve as cultural pressure valves, allowing the intensely private society to become temporarily, joyfully public. There are also rare moments when Luxembourg's invisible social barriers lower, creating genuine community connections across linguistic and cultural divides. But when the festivals end and normal life resumes, some of Luxembourg's most complex cultural negotiations happen behind closed doors, particularly around evolving ideas about gender and family roles. Number 5. Gender roles behind closed doors. Luxembourg presents a fascinating gender paradox. Progressive laws protecting equality coexist with surprisingly traditional private expectations. On paper, the country champions women's rights with policies that would impress the most liberal societies. Women participate actively in politics, business, and education, contributing to Luxembourg's image as a modern, enlightened nation. Yet behind the closed doors of Luxembourgish homes, older patterns persist with stubborn resilience. Many families still follow unspoken scripts about domestic responsibilities, career priorities, and child-rearing duties that will feel familiar to previous generations. These aren't necessarily oppressive arrangements. Many couples choose traditional divisions of labor, but they reveal how surface-level progress doesn't always penetrate deeply rooted cultural expectations. For foreign women, particularly those from more egalitarian cultures, these subtle traditionalist undercurrents can feel surprisingly restrictive. They arrive expecting European progressiveness, but encounter social pressures that seem to belong to earlier decades. Professional women describe navigating workplace cultures that officially support equality, while unofficially maintaining old boy networks that feel impenetrable. The younger generation is challenging these patterns, pushing for relationships that prioritize partnership over traditional role divisions. But change happens slowly in a culture that values stability and tradition. creating generational tensions that simmer beneath Luxembourg's characteristically polite surface. These private negotiations about gender and power mirror Luxembourg as public approach to justice, an area where the country has developed surprisingly gentle methods for maintaining its famously safe society. Number 4. Justice with a gentle hand. Luxembourg has achieved something that many countries spend fortunes trying to accomplish. It is genuinely one of the world's safest places to live. But the methods behind this safety reveal a justice philosophy that might surprise anyone expecting harsh deterrence and punitive measures. Instead, Luxembourg has crafted a legal system that emphasizes rehabilitation over retribution, treating crime as a social problem to be solved rather than a moral failing to be punished. Prisons here function more like intensive social work programs than punishment facilities. Education programs, job training, psychological counseling, and reintegration support transform incarceration into something resembling therapeutic intervention. Even serious offenses often result in shorter sentences focused on addressing underlying causes rather than simply removing offenders from society. Critics, particularly from countries with more punitive approaches, sometimes dismiss Luxembourg's gentle justice as being soft on crime. But locals argue that harsh punishment makes little sense in a posthumous, small society where everyone eventually needs to coexist. The goal isn't vengeance, it's restoration of social harmony. However, this gentleness has clear boundaries. Financial crimes, tax fraud, and corruption face aggressive prosecution, reflecting Luxembourg's priorities about what truly threatens social stability. The message is clear. The country will forgive many human failings, but it won't tolerate threats to the financial systems that underpin its prosperity. This balance of mercy and strategic toughness extends beyond domestic policy into Luxembourg's surprisingly outsized role in international affairs. Number 3. The tiny country with giant influence, with fewer than 700,000 residents. Luxembourg should be a geopolitical footnote, a small, pleasant European country that occasionally appears in trivia questions. Instead, it has somehow managed to position itself as one of Europe's most influential voices, wielding power that seems to defy the basic mathematics of international relations. As a founding member of the European Union, Luxembourg hosts critical institutions, including the European Court of Justice, giving it permanent placement at the center of continental decision-making. Its financial sector provides leverage in global markets that extends far beyond what its size should allow. Corporate tax policies attract multinational headquarters, creating economic relationships that translate into political influence across multiple continents. This influence hasn't gone unnoticed or uncriticized. Larger countries sometimes bristle at Luxembourg's ability to shape policies that affect hundreds of millions of people while representing fewer residents than most mid-sized cities. Critics accuse the country of exploiting its small size to play big games in international finance, using regulatory advantages to compete unfairly with larger economies. Yet Luxembourg's diplomatic culture emphasizes mediation over confrontation, making it an unexpectedly valuable broker in European negotiations. When larger countries reach impasses, Luxembourg's representatives often craft compromises that nobody else could propose without triggering nationalist responses. It's diplomacy through strategic insignificance, being small enough to seem unthreatening, while being connected enough to matter. This talent for strategic positioning has led Luxembourg to make perhaps its boldest gamble yet, betting its future on an industry that doesn't even exist on Earth. Number 2. Betting on the stars. In what might be the most audacious move by any small nation in modern history, Luxembourg has decided to become a space mining superpower. Through government initiatives, private partnerships, and legal frameworks that don't exist anywhere else, the country is positioning itself to control future rights over asteroid mining and extraterrestrial resource extraction. The plan sounds like science fiction. Secure international agreements for mining asteroids. Establish Luxembourg as the legal headquarters for space resource companies, and potentially corner the market on rare minerals that could be worth trillions of dollars. Critics dismiss it as fantasy, but Luxembourg's track record of turning ambitious bets into economic reality makes skeptics nervous. For a country that built its modern prosperity on being the first to offer certain financial services, space mining represents a similar strategy applied to an even more futuristic frontier. If successful, Luxembourg could become the epicenter of humanity's next great industrial revolution. If it fails, the investment will seem like an expensive national delusion. Locals find the space mining initiative both thrilling and surreal. Their quiet, traditional homeland positioned to play a starring role in humanity's expansion beyond Earth. It's the ultimate expression of Luxembourg's core philosophy. Think bigger than your size, move faster than your competitors, and never let limited geography constrain unlimited ambition. This cosmic gamble brings us to the final question about Luxembourg's identity. In a country defined by contradictions, what is its true nature? Number 1. The most sinful saintly nation. So, is Luxembourg truly the most sinful country in the world? The answer depends entirely on how you define sin, and that ambiguity might be Luxembourg's greatest strength. From one perspective, the evidence seems damning. A financial haven that helps global elites minimize taxes. A secretive banking system that operates in whispers, corporate loopholes that governments worldwide struggle to close. Luxembourg has built its prosperity on services that many consider morally questionable, if not outright harmful to global economic fairness. Yet from another angle, Luxembourg appears almost saintly. Crime rates that make other countries envious. A justice system focused on rehabilitation rather than revenge. Social policies that prioritize harmony over individual expression. It's a place where extreme wealth coexists with remarkable social stability, where diversity thrives within carefully maintained order. The truth is that Luxembourg has transcended traditional categories of good and evil by becoming something more interesting, a nation that thrives on contradiction. It's discreetly wealthy, yet modestly presented, privately conservative, yet publicly progressive, historically traditional, yet futuristically ambitious. Every aspect of Luxembourgish identity contains its own opposite, creating a cultural complexity that defies simple judgment. Perhaps Luxembourg's greatest sin isn't financial secrecy or tax optimization. It's the sin of being impossibly seductive. It offers a vision of how society might function if everyone agreed to be civilized, wealthy, and discreet simultaneously. It's a place that makes other countries' problems seem solvable and other cultures' conflicts seem unnecessary. In the end, Luxembourg isn't sinful in any traditional sense. It is something far more dangerous, a working example of how the world might operate if it chose cooperation over competition, subtlety over spectacle, and quiet competence over dramatic gesture. And maybe that's the most subversive thing of all.